Dr. Demian Dressler from Hawaii. Welcome to Dog Talk. It is so great to have you here.
Well, thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
Well, I don't know how you have time to have a veterinary practice because this looks like a life's work. I've never seen a book so incredibly organized, thought through, thorough. I'm in awe. I mean, this is the sort of book I've written about pregnancy and childbirth and dogs and cats. It doesn't hold a candle to the way that you went to the absolute end of every single possible topic, everything that anyone could ever want to know about the food that goes into a dog after he's got cancer, the food that went into him before he got cancer. How did you obviously have a mind that has enormous scope. How did you start to organize this massive amount of information that doesn't exist anywhere else? I mean, this is the thing I'm in awe of. 99% of what's in this book I've never seen anywhere else, ever. And it's all great, vital information for humans and for dogs. How did you decide how to break it down in this very manageable for us as a consumer way?
Well, it all started many years back. I mean, and I've been in veterinary medicine for many, many years, and I began to notice that we were having a literal epidemic of dog cancer. And as you know, dog cancer is the number one cause of death in dogs right now, and half of the dogs over 10 are succumbing to dog cancer, and 1 in 3 dogs overall are getting dog cancer. It's incredibly common. So I started looking around, and I started getting a little bit shocked about what I was seeing in my veterinary practice as a practicing veterinarian, kind of in the trenches.
Yes.
And I realized also that the guardians of these dogs, the dog lovers and the pet owning community, weren't getting the adequate education that they needed around dog cancer, because it's very hard to get all that one needs in the course of a 20-minute office consult at the veterinarians, or even a half an hour or 40 minutes at the oncologist.
That's right.
You can't absorb it all. There's too much. There's life quality considerations. There's life expectancy. There's what can you do? Chemotherapy, radiation, surgery. What about diet? What about the immune system? What about all the mind-body connection?
Yes.
What about all these things that impact survival times and quality of life? And I realized that there's no way in the world that myself or another medical professional could deliver this information. So I started setting out, and it took literally thousands and thousands and thousands of hours of research and organization and all of that to provide this information in an easy way, a gentle way, a friendly way that everybody can educate themselves and really be their pet's primary healthcare advocate, which you have to be these days in the medical world. In a question like cancer, there's so many things to know. The guardian has to educate themselves a little bit so they know what's coming up, what are all of the options, what can they do aside from just surgery, just radiation, just therapy, right?
But this is true in cancer care across the species, and as we know, dogs have been used heavily or as a model in human cancer in various ways. I mean, there seems to be a good correlation between the two species, and yet you'd be hard-pressed anywhere. The accumulation you have of information about diet alone, you'd be hard-pressed to find this anywhere. It is not given to humans with cancer. Nobody is given any of the brilliant, spot-on advice that you give about the kinds of vegetables to avoid, for example, and the fact that a vegetarian diet, which is all they seem to tell humans, is a vegetarian diet. What's that? What is that? There's no logic to that. And I'm very annoyed by, there's a bestseller called The Anti-Cancer, that book by the guy with the brain tumor. His great advice is don't eat McDonald's and drink Coca-Cola. That's hardly what one wants to know. Yeah, and then what? And I'm in awe. There so often people have called into the show wanting to know. This used to be a call-in show, and my show on Sirius, which you're going to come on also if we can figure out the time difference, Cat Chat. People want to know, well, my dog has cancer, or how about I have a 8-month-old golden retriever? What should I feed that dog to not encourage cancer cells? Well, nobody tells them. No one tells them about carbs. No one tells them about sugars. This book has such a fantastic, not one thing contradicts another. I don't know if you ever in the olden days read the Adele Davis books. You remember the human nutrition
I remember.
books? They go back a long, long, long way, and those used to be the only books that existed to tell people how to eat to be healthy or how to eat if you were ill. The problem is you'd read Chapter 3, it would contradict Chapter 7 and 12, because, you could take this and that and the other thing. You can't take the other thing. And your book even has something I would never have imagined, what not to take, the supplements you must not take, a long, long list, including flaxseed. Things that have a good factual reason, but people don't gather them all together to give to human or animal patients. No one's done this before. What you've done, Demian, is a one-off work. It's not like you've taken other people's work and just organized it better. This is all primary research. It's incredible.
Yeah, and it was so important to get that out there because what goes on when you don't have a lot of medical training and a lot of medical background, you're doing the best that you can, and when you get a cancer diagnosis, your world will be turned upside down.
Yep.
There's no way around it. And there's initial reaction, which we have to manage so that we can get through to the point where we're thinking clearly. And at that point, a lot of questions come up. And so what people will do many times, and it's so understandable, is go get all the information that they can get. And the problem is because they don't have the medical training, because they don't have research background, it's very difficult to assess the quality of the information.
That's right.
Online. You don't know.
And I always say to people, stay off of Dr. Google, because all it will do is confuse and frighten you. And I don't care what your medical problem is. It's simply not a place to go. If they had access to the medical-type journals that you clearly have access to, as you say, by the fourth word, we don't know what they're talking about, we non-medical types. So,
exactly
but by the same token, the whole topic of diet is one that is completely ignored, both in the pet world, ignored except for by people putting a lot of not great ingredients in bags and then selling it as a prescription diet, or in the human world where doctors don't have any human doctors of any kind, from oncology to whatever you want, pediatrics, they don't have any information about diet, about nutrition. It's simply not their focus.
It's not their forte. And
it's not their forte.
What's the number one cause from human studies? What are the number one factors in cancer development? Lifestyle and diet. And diet alone is estimated to account for up to 30% of human cancer cases.
Is that right?
That's
because,
right.
Well, I just know I lived in Hong Kong a long time, for a little while, 4 months or so. And at that time, Kentucky Fried Chicken wasn't there yet, but McDonald's was. And all the Asian women looked slender and Asian because they ate mostly Asian food, although there was a lot of fancy kind of European, wildly expensive restaurants. Within the decade after I left, from what I understand, breast cancer in Asian women, which had been nearly non-existent, was skyrocketing because they'd been eating fast food, the food that had never been there before, junk, garbage food full of chemicals. I didn't know there was actually a percentage, but I knew that in an environment where people had not been exposed to this stuff, they didn't get sick. And, of course, it's only in the last, pick a number, dozen or 15 years that we've insisted on feeding dogs highly processed carbohydrates full of chemicals, full of really poor original ingredients from a bag only, and stop giving them real recognizable food. Told not to, right?
Yeah, and you're precisely right. And guess what is cancer's favorite food? The expression I like to use is cancer is a junk food junkie. It loves sugar.
Yes, it loves sugar, which means it likes carbs, which turn into sugar.
Yes, precisely, and it's so common. It's so common in cancer cells that it's called a cancer. It's a phenotype. That means that it's shared among cancer cells as a common type of trait. And it also when cancer cells eat sugar, it's called the Warburg effect, named after Otto Warburg, who made the discovery. But the problem is that information has not made it out into the public awareness, and so that's one of the main reasons for producing the Dog Cancer Survival Guide, is so we have scientific literature that can now be penetrated into the public awareness, so that people can really be their dog's primary healthcare advocate, real guardianship, really educated, so they know what the real story is in all of these items. And that's another reason why we write the Dog Cancer blog, myself and Dr. Sue Ettinger, who's an oncologist.
She'll be coming on the show in a couple of weeks.
That's right, yes. So
she's going to come on and discuss, what got her involved with you and working on this. But yes, your dog cancer blog, that's something people can all sign up for. Tell them how to do that. I'll also have it on the outgoing announcement, a link to it, so people can sign up. Because it's excellent. It's many of the topics that are brought up in the book, but maybe some of them are even more updated. You got to have the book in your hands if you have a dog with cancer. You have to have the book in your hands if you own a boxer, a golden retriever, or a Rottweiler, just for openers. You have to have the book in your hands because you're living with a dog who's got a sword of Damocles hanging over his head. I mean, I lost a Rottie to long bone cancer, and God knows how many people have lost their Goldens, and now even wonderful man that listens to the show, Gil Lutz, lost his 5-year-old guide dog, Evie, who, they start all these guide dogs with the worst possible nutrition given free by the companies that want to get these dogs and their future, blind owners onto them. These dogs are all started, unfortunately, with the worst possible nutrition. She died at 5. You've got to have this book in your hands, guys, because reading it is going to change your dog's life. I mean, I've been saying for ages to people, Demian, you can't feed an all-carb diet. You can't feed only kibble. It's just not appropriate for the species. And, I have so many people that are thrilled to learn that and thrilled to start to incorporate real food into their dog's diet in whatever way they choose to do it. But so many vets are like, well, wait a minute. We have science to prove that if you just eat the stuff out of the bag, yeah, I know about your science. We know where your science is taking all of us, which is straight to hell in many cases. Apocaps. This is the most amazing thing. You have come up with a supplement, Apocaps. I don't know if we have time to talk about it in detail, but as I'm reading your book, from the very beginning, I'm thinking, it's great that people have this for their dogs. It's just on so many levels because you have all the mindset as well, the emotional part, both yours and your dog's. Of course, mostly it's ours because we're projecting. But as I'm reading it, I'm thinking it's kind of unfair that humans don't have this information and this book for them. And then I read about Apocaps that you have gotten. Tell about this U.S. government $250,000 grant. I mean, for human study. Talk about that. It's so great.
Yeah, well, Functional Nutriments is a company that I've co-founded, and we were awarded a government grant for research and development concerning the constituents in Apocaps. And Apocaps is a supplement that I had designed for the dogs in my practice with beneficial effects. Now, I have to be careful what I say because it's
I know you're not allowed to make claims.
Yes.
I'll make them for you.
Right?
No government is giving $250,000 to somebody who isn't on to something with huge health value.
Yeah,
they're
that's
just
right.
not. $250,000 isn't chump change, and the government doesn't throw their money away. If anything, they always lean towards the industry. Lean towards things that are chemical based, if you will. And this is a nutraceutical. Is that right?
Yeah, and what a nutraceutical means is a high-potency clinical supplement that's derived from dietary constituents. That means that it's stuff that you would normally find most of the time in what a dog or a human would eat if they were getting a balanced lifestyle. And so
right.
The technology behind Apocaps is based on another little-known yet extremely widespread phenomenon that occurs in cancer cells. And I'll take just 60 seconds and explain what this is.
Good.
There's a fundamental genetic mechanism that exists in all of the cells in the body where when they reach the end of their life, they're supposed to commit self-suicide. This is called apoptosis because cells get old and they get damaged and deranged and they get infected and they have to go away somehow. And so the body has genes that get kicked on at the right time for cell turnover so that these old cells can be replaced by healthy new body cells. One of the hallmarks of cancer, almost across the board, is they lack apoptosis. They do not have the genetic control so that when they get deranged, when they're supposed to go away and disappear to get recycled, they don't. They keep on growing. So they try to act as if they are immortal vampires in the body, continuing to populate, continuing to divide. Now, here's the key. If we're able to attack this genetic control and we're able to turn these genes on to flick on the magical switch for cancer cell suicide, those cancer cells will go away. And that was the theory and the practice in developing profile for the constituents in apocaps. There are certain things that you find in the diet that are capable of turning on these molecular switches to induce apoptosis, which is programmed cell death. Therefore, we can help cancer patients. And this technology, this basic idea is very, very cutting edge, even though we all probably in 8th grade science learned about apoptosis. Yes. And it probably occupied about a paragraph in our biology textbook.
Right.
But there's a huge industry, but it's very cutting edge. It's very, very new. All the pharmaceutical companies now are very excited about turning on apoptosis.
So what's interesting is that you're a conventional vet. You're not an oncologist. And you saw a problem, and you were looking for solutions just because clearly you're that kind of person. And you find yourself, and I'm sure this is not the only area in which you find yourself, at the cutting edge of new thinking outside of the box, thinking in lateral rather than traditional ways. Isn't that an amazing thing about the human mind? And where there's a will, there can be a way. You simply were looking for the better mousetrap because there aren't any decent mousetraps. And where dog cancer is concerned, people aren't really told anything. Oh, I'm really sorry, your dog's got mast cell cancer. So we'll do the surgery, we'll get clean margins, and then, oh, well, we'll just like shrug and hope. But you go into such fantastic detail about every kind of cancer that a dog can have, mast cell and osteosarcoma and lymphoma, and what it really means and how it really works in the body. And then you have, and I like the word you used early on about gentle. With all that you learned, I'm imagining that many times you're frustrated or excited by the ignorance all around you, ignorance on the part of, people with their pets that are desperately sad and don't know anything and have nowhere to go, and probably mad at the ignorance of other professionals. And yet the tone in the book is gentle and kind. It's not judgmental. It's not strident. It's not pushy or demanding. It's just offering just an incredible amount of advice on so many levels. I mean, it's incredible. I hope you make $1 billion because you deserve to make a ton of money because it's not what you set out to do. So if you if you've come up with this nutraceutical, it would be so cool. It's like, for once, it isn't one of those big companies that's, been I don't know, doing awful things for years or that we don't have a high regard for, that we're suspicious of, or that spent millions and millions and millions of dollars to come up with an idea that you simply had and did in this very simple, even simplistic way. And you just, you somehow wound up at the finish line or at the very cutting edge, the precipice of this great tomorrow for thinking about cancer and the fact that it's an epidemic in dogs and, of course, in the human world seems to be rather epidemic as well, that you've come up with this thinking that may you talk about the apocaps as being valuable to use when your dog's having chemotherapy, that it may enhance the value of the chemotherapy. But, of course, it's also instead of, is it, or for dogs who wouldn't be candidates for chemo?
In my hands, the apocaps have a lot of beneficial effects in my patients. And what I have seen, again, from personal experience, is that when we use apocaps in conjunction with the full-spectrum care, in conjunction with the dietary changes and the other beneficial steps, I have seen miracle stories. I mean, I have seen...
Well, you have a lot of them in the book, and they don't smack of, like, we all got down on our knees and prayed and lit some incense. They're obviously real stories. Now, they're anecdotal. They're the N of one, as they say in medicine. It isn't... Oh, you explained something else really well in the book, which I'd never really understood before. The concept of the controlled study and the placebo. That's not the kind of study that you've talked about here or in some other areas, whether it's diet or other things. That you can do a study where you simply are comparing the dog's condition now versus what it was like a month or 2 months or a year ago. And that's a different way of studying whether something works. And it doesn't really matter if it only works on 200 dogs, because when your dog has, stomach cancer, you sort of just want to know, what can I try? Because I want to try anything I can. You don't need it to be a double-blind placebo study that someone spent $1 million on and came up with an answer that was like, comme ci, comme ça. You want to know, this thing will do no harm, and and it might very well do a miraculous job of shrinking that tumor or stopping that kind of cancer, whatever it may be, right?
Yeah, it's precisely right. And the kind of study you're talking about is historically controlled. That means you take one dog, how was it before versus after the intervention. And but don't get me wrong, I need to be sure that everybody understands that the gold standard still is a placebo-controlled double-blind clinical study. That is really the gold standard for what we have now in research. And as a matter of fact, I'm in communication with Phil Bergman, who developed...
Oh, yes, he's been on the show. He's at Memorial Sloan Kettering and the American and the Animal Medical Center. He came on when they got the melanoma vaccine, which was an amazing cross-species research. But, the thing is, and we're going to have to wrap up, Demian, but we've got to find another time for you to come on because there's so many specific things in here that people would love to just know more about. Fish oil, many things that you see from so many different points of view. It really makes you realize how many of these health issues and benefits you and your dog should have from the time that they join your life, whether they're puppies or oldsters. And we should probably all be doing a lot of this stuff ourselves. A lot of this has such benefit before. And I just don't think that the kind of study that costs all that money is going to be done on all these topics. And it's not going to be done for the sake of or the welfare of dogs. It'll be done using dogs for the welfare of people, which isn't a bad thing, but so much of what's in here is simply, it rings true. It feels like logic. It feels like common sense. And it feels like, why not try it? So I'm just completely enamored of the book and of your thinking and of the incredible work that went into this. It's just, and so well organized. And that's, the index is brilliant. The table of contents is brilliant. Everything is easily found. And that's another thing, especially when you're really anxious or frightened or under stress when your dog gets a cancer diagnosis. It's great to be able to just open the front and just, look under multivitamin supplements and go to that page, and then you're going to say what you have to say about that. It's a terrific book. I can't wait to talk to Sue Ettinger about her part in it, and we definitely have to make a date for you to come back. This is just, almost 500 pages later. We're obviously just scratching the surface, but everybody needs to get the Dog Cancer Survival Guide and just hope your dog doesn't get it. If your dog does have it, let's hope it makes life a lot better for both of you. Demian, thank you so much for the book and for taking your time. Can't wait to talk to you even more about this.
Thank you, Tracy.
Have a great day. We'll talk again. Thanks for listening, folks. We will be back next week, and you will hear more about this book from the co-author soon. Kiss your kitties, hug your pooches, and I'll talk to you next week. Bye for now.